So I think we might make a start. Hello, I am Jacky. I'm from Matific and I'm in Sydney, Australia. Welcome, because I can see we've got people from far and wide all around Australia, New Zealand. Hi to everybody, kia ora, across the Tasman there today. And far and wide, we've got people from many other countries as well joining us today, which is fantastic. I hope you've all got your exercise gear on, ready to do some movement. Just kidding, you can relax tonight. But hopefully you're going to take away lots of fantastic activities that you will be able to do with your students that are really fun and active and relate to mathematics as well. Now, you can probably already tell I was a school teacher. People can pick the voice fairly quickly. So I was a primary school teacher for 28 years before I joined the amazing world of digital mathematics with Matific. And so a little bit later in this presentation, you'll hear a little bit more from me. But I want to welcome our special presenters today. First of all, Rachel, hello. Tell everybody where you're from at the moment. Where are you?
I'm on the mid-north coast of New South Wales in Port Macquarie.
Beautiful part of the world.
It is, absolutely.
That's beautiful. Stephen, hello and welcome. Where are you?
Hello, Jacky. My hometown is Adelaide, and I'm glad to see a few Adelaideans are on tonight. Where we started the business Footsteps 30 years ago. But tonight I'm at a educational leaders conference near Phillip Island in Victoria.
Does that mean that you missed the Crows game the other night?
I did, but I watched it on TV.
I had to throw that in. We've got a bit of rivalry there, different teams. You know, he's a Crows fan, I'm a Giants fan. But anyway, we won't talk about that tonight, although we are talking about being active. Your Crows probably should have been a little bit more active the other night, perhaps. Anyway, that's great. Thank you for joining us, Stephen and Rachel. I just want to do a little bit of an introduction so that you know what's going on tonight. Firstly, there's the agenda for the evening. Sorry if it's not evening where you are. I keep saying evening. It's evening where I am in Sydney. There is a chat box for you to say hello, where you're from, say hi. That's great. But later this evening, towards the end, we're going to have a Q&A session. Now, you might have a question for me or for Rachel or for Stephen. Pop that in the Q&A box. So just use the Q&A box for questions for the panelists. And you might want to say who it's directed to. So say question for Rachel or question for Stephen or Jacky, whatever it is. So we'll use the Q&A box. At any point during the presentations, please just do that. Pop in a question and we won't miss you. We'll try and get through them all if we possibly can. We've allowed plenty of time at the end there. So here's your agenda for this evening. I am going to do a quick poll, a survey. So just to make sure you're awake and engaged, that's coming in a moment. And then you're going to have a fantastic session with Rachel. She's going to have lots of practical ideas that you'll be able to use with your students. I'm going to show you, it might seem strange, but how to get active with digital maths. Interesting. And then the other way around, how can you do movement activities but throw in some maths? So Stephen's going to help us with that. And as I said, some Q&A. So here are your presenters. You've already met us all. We've got Rachel up in Port Macquarie, Stephen, well, at the moment is in Melbourne, and I am in Sydney. Let's make a start. So I am going to launch a poll. Are you ready? Let's launch this poll question. Thinking about your students in schools, what do you think is the recommended amount of time that schools should be allocating to physical activity each week? Stephen and Rachel, give me a nod that you can see that quiz okay. Yeah, I can see people are already answering it. Just give me your best guess. We're not going to score you. There's no prize. I'm just curious to see how many of you actually get it pretty close to being right. Let's see. So do you think it's about, this is at school, what is the minimum amount that you should be providing in terms of physical activity with your students? Would it be 30 minutes a week, 60 minutes a week, 150 minutes a week, or you really just be honest if you've got absolutely no idea? I threw that in for people like me that sometimes have no clue. All right, I'll give you just a few more seconds. I can see lots of people have done the survey, so that's great. I'm going to end the poll in a few more seconds, and then I'll share the results with you. 3, 2, 1. I'll end the poll and I'll share those results. Can you see those results? Can you see them there? Okay, interesting. So just a few people thought 30 minutes, quite a few thought 60, many thought 150, and thank you to those 3 really honest people who said no idea. Well, I'm going to put you out of your misery and I'm going to tell you what the answer is. This is the New South Wales guidelines, but I think it's pretty similar across all of Australia. It's supposed to be 150 minutes, and you know, most of you actually got it correct, so well done. Our planned physical activity for students, K to 10, we call it K in New South Wales, but it would be prep to 10 or reception to 10, depending on where you are. Now, as I said, I was a teacher for 28 years, and actually, most of the time, the last few years of my career, I was in upper primary teaching year 6. And we had competitive sport once a week, and that was a whole block in the afternoon. So I was kind of thinking about, did we do 150 minutes? Now, that whole block sounds like a lot, but when I thought about it, a lot of it was travel time, you know, which may have been on a bus sometimes, traveling to and from the venue, students lining up, waiting to start, setting up equipment. In reality, it was probably about 60 minutes the game, if you're lucky, that they were doing maybe 60 minutes. We also had a PE lesson planned once a week, meant to be 50 minutes, but once again, by the time you pack up and set up and whatever, probably 40 minutes. So it felt like quite a bit, but actually that was about 100 minutes. So where do you get the other 50 minutes from? And I'm hoping tonight the answer might be in your maths lessons, might be part of it. And if you are someone that teaches in the younger year levels, I know at my school, we didn't do competitive sport. There wasn't that whole block afternoon. So where are they getting their 150 minutes from? So I'm hoping you might get some ideas today to help you with all of that. And this is just something to think about. How does that compare to the number of hours you spend sitting in the classroom, whether it's on the floor or the children at their desk? So it's probably a bit of an imbalance there. All right, I thought that was worth thinking about. Now I'm just going to go back there. So anyway, Rachel's the guy or the girl who's going to help us. So I really appreciate you being with us here, Rachel. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, and then you can share yours. Don't forget sound. And then Rachel's going to give us some fantastic ideas on how you can maybe make maths active. Welcome, Rachel.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
All good.
Awesome. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Jackie, for having me here tonight, for letting me share with everybody what I've been working on. So over the next half an hour or so, I'm going to introduce you to an entirely new approach to teaching maths that I'm sure both you and your students are going to love. So before I start, though, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm coming to you tonight from Biripi land. I'm very fortunate to live and work on some of the most beautiful country. And I pay my respects to Aboriginal elders past, present and emerging. And just want to let you know that at the end of the presentation, I will be showing you how you can incorporate traditional Indigenous games into your maths program. So make sure you stick around for that. But first of all, we're going to look at why students need more physical activity, what physical activity students need, and why combining maths and physical education works. So the first one, why do students need more physical activity? So one of the reasons all of us need to be exercising for at least 30 minutes per day is because there's a global obesity epidemic. Never before in history has there been so much food available for so many people to access so easily and with so little effort required to collect it, prepare it, consume it. So just pop into the chat box, if you would, what you think the current obesity level is among children in Australia. I'll just give you a couple of seconds to do that. I can't actually see those results. Somehow I've managed to lose the chat box in sharing my screen.
Can you see the chat box? You can't see the chat box. We're getting lots of answers here for you, Rachel.
What sort of numbers are we getting?
Some of the guesses that we're getting here, we've got 30%, Marlene was saying, Deirdre saying 50%, Shannon 70%, Sue 20%, Rachel 10%. We're getting a big range of answers. Quite a few here, Tasneem, Debbie, Shannon in the 40% range, quite a few of those, Christine 60%, someone else 1 in 4. So a lot between 40, 50, 60 seems to be quite a common answer.
Well, thankfully, it's not actually quite that high. So we've got 1 in 4 children obese or overweight, and they have actually increased the scale to include morbidly obese for children, which is pretty scary. But that's actually more prevalent in lower socioeconomic areas and in rural and remote communities. So while it's 1 in 4 across Australia, it is slightly disproportionate as to where you find those children. And the reason that we find this, one of the major factors, is that 96% of children are not receiving their recommended daily intake of fresh fruit and vegetables. So this is influenced a lot by their parents. And with those numbers that we were hearing, it's actually 63% of adults that are currently overweight or obese. And that statistic was before lockdowns and COVID, which I'm sure has boosted that quite a bit. But there are two things. The good news is there are two things we can do about this to help students. The first one is that we can assist them in making healthier food choices. So we can encourage them, we can reward them when they bring healthy options, but as teachers, we really can't change what they're bringing. We can't replace their chocolate-coated tiny teddies, but we can encourage them. The thing we can do, though, is increase the amount of time that we provide to children to be physically active. Just because I'm just going to have a drink for a second. So this solution not only targets obesity, but it actually allows us to improve a lot of areas in our students' lives. So by giving benefits, by giving children increased amount of physical activity, it means that they're able to release chemicals that create good moods and happiness, which are serotonin and endorphins. We allow them to improve their memory. We can reduce their risk of blood-related diseases, such as high blood pressure. We can boost their energy levels. And of course, we control their weight. We help them burn calories and fat. But it's actually not only obesity and physical health which will benefit from increased physical activity. So they've done studies at Illinois University with Chuck Herman, and he's repeatedly demonstrated that just 20 minutes of moderate walking is enough to increase neurological function. So if you have a look at this picture, you'll see that the person's brain is so much more active after just 20 minutes of walking. And if you put that in context, here in Australia, next week we have students sitting NAPLAN exams. Imagine how much better your students would do if they had time to do some exercise before they sat down. And I know for most schools, the kids come in first thing in the morning and do those exams without that exercise. Imagine how much better they'd do after a run. So the question then is, what physical activity do students need? So while any increase in physical activity is obviously going to be good, certain physical activity is better. And it's actually if we can teach the 12 fundamental movement skills, our students are more likely to go on to be lifelong sports people. So again, using the chat box, see if you can tell me what you think some of those 12 fundamental movement skills might be. And Jackie, I'll get you to help me out again by calling some of those out for me, if you would.
No problem. Let's hear some of these answers. Hop, skip, jump, we've got straight away. Throwing, catching, running, jumping, skipping, balancing, someone suggested. Running and jumping, climbing, someone's mentioned climbing, that's a bit of a different one. Walking, running and skipping, stretching, that's a different one. Some people were talking about the brain exercises, left, right brain exercises as well. Tippy toes, it's an interesting one. Yoga, another one. We're getting great answers here.
Yeah, lots of people. Great ideas.
Galloping. Wow, you've come up with dancing. Now Stephen will be happy with that one. Maybe it was Stephen that wrote it, I didn't see. Yeah, see, there you go, he's happy. Kicking, walking, all right, I think probably time's up. Stretching.
Awesome.
Cross body movement was the last
Thank
one.
you. So let's have a look. So there are actually 12 specific fundamental movement skills, and you can see them all there: static balance, vertical jump, sprint run, catch, hop, leap, side gallop, kick, skip, two-handed strike, overarm throw, and dodge. So those 12 are the building blocks of all sport and physical activity. What that means is that if students can master the overarm throw, they can then be a competent pitcher in baseball or in tennis. So for students to contribute during a game of soccer, they have to be able to sprint run, to side gallop, to kick, to leap, and dodge. The scary thing is that while able-bodied students can master the 5 fundamental movement skills by grade 2, research is showing that only 10% of students are actually achieving this goal. So Children don't develop these skills naturally, but they have to be taught. And they also need to be given repeated opportunities to practice the skills so that they can develop into healthy adults that enjoy playing sport. So then the question is, why combine PE and maths? And we heard at the beginning that right now in New South Wales, our teachers are expected to deliver 2.5 hours per week of moderate to vigorous physical activity. And interestingly, as Jacky was saying, only 1 hour of this is actually allowed to be organised weekly sport. The rest is supposed to be interwoven into the program. But at the same time, PISA results are showing that 2/5 of our students are failing at maths. So teachers are expected then to spend an hour a day teaching maths to improve our national maths results. It doesn't take a genius to work out that if you take out all your eating breaks in a week, you have about 25 hours of teaching. I know in New South Wales, we're now mandated to teach 5 hours of maths, 5 hours of literacy, 2.5 hours of physical activity, geography, history, art and craft science, digital technology, half an hour of library and assembly are all squeezed into the timetable. So the only way we can add any more sport and to actually achieve all of those goals is to put PE into something else, and maths becomes the easiest option as far as I'm concerned. So by using the first or last 15 minutes of every maths lesson to teach those fundamental movement skills that I showed you, we're giving our children 15 minutes of extra physical activity per day while they're learning maths, and it makes the maths fun and enjoyable. That's 1.25 hours of extra sport time per week during maths. And it also means that they're going to be having fun in maths. They're able to engage more, as we saw with that Chuck Hillman study, they engage more of their brain. And also they're able to practice some of the soft skills that we struggle to teach in PE. So the things like being part of a team, being a team leader, sharing and cooperation can all be taught in here as well. So let's put all of this into practice. Now, normally I'd get you up and moving. That's not quite as easy when we're doing a webinar. But what I am going to let you know is that everything that I'm showing you tonight, you can actually grab for free from my website. So it's Learn from Play. Up the top, you'll see it has that resources drop down. Physically active maths will get you to where you need to be, or you can see the header there, maths and movement. If you click on that, you'll get through to it as well. So what I've done to make it a little bit easier is I've actually pre-recorded.
In this section, we are going to look at a super adaptable.
I've actually pre-recorded this for you. So I'm hoping you can see that and hear that, and it'll show you what it looks like when you're doing this with your students.
Game called Card Swap. In this instance of Card Swap, we're going to look at how this simple game can be used to teach older students in years 5 or 6 the concept of equivalent fractions, decimals and percentages. I've chosen this topic in particular because this can be tricky to teach and provides a great activity to demonstrate how movement can be added to even the most complex of mathematical concepts. The purpose of this activity is for learners to discover the relationship between numbers represented as a fraction, decimal or percentage, and to grow familiar with the relationship between these three terms and how they are expressed. You'll see in this video of me presenting this course at a live teacher professional development workshop that when I present Card Swap, I stand in the middle of the circle and have the teachers on the outside. I give each of the participants on the outside of the circle a fraction, decimal or percentage card representing a version of half, a third or a quarter, ensuring I alternate so that no two players have the same equivalent next to each other. I've found after playing this game loads of times, it's actually easier if participants are sitting rather than standing, as their places can become confused when they cross the circle. Once everyone has their cards, I explain to the teachers or students that each of their cards is an equivalent representation of a fraction, decimal or percentage. They will have a representation of a half, third or a quarter. I then tell everyone in the circle that I will call two numbers, and anyone whose cards represent the relationship between those two numbers must cross through the centre of the circle and change places with someone on the opposite side of the circle. For example, if I called the numbers 50 and 100, anyone with a card marked 50%, 0.5 or a half must cross the circle and change places with someone on the opposite side of the circle because 50 is half of 100. I then repeat this example for numbers such as 30 and 90, where anyone with 33%, 0.33 and a third needs to cross the circle and change places. And a third time I demonstrate this with the numbers 10 and 40, where anyone with 25%, 0.25 and a quarter crosses the circle and changes places. By this stage, everyone should have had a chance to cross the circle and learn what the relationship is between their card and the numbers being called. It's important to make students aware that the smaller number does not need to be called first, and depending on the student's ability, the numbers don't even need to be whole numbers. For example, an eighth and 1/16 could be used to represent a half. When everyone gets the hang of the game, the idea of fundamental movement skills can be introduced. So students must now skip, side gallop or hop across the circle. Participants still need to cross the circle when their fraction, decimal or percentage is called, but they must cross using the chosen fundamental movement skill rather than just a sprint run. Once they have mastered this, the cards can be passed around in a clockwise direction, so every participant has a new equivalent fraction, decimal or percent. As soon as students understand the concept of the game, I remove one of the chairs or cushions, and the last person to cross the circle gets to have a turn at being in the middle, and they must call the two numbers. With my students, I will sometimes choose who will be in the middle, as this offers a brilliant opportunity for me to assess that student's understanding and provide individual explicit instruction where it's required. I will often change this up a bit too, and instead of the student in the middle simply calling two numbers of their choice, I whisper the relationship to them that they have to use, such as a quarter, and they have to come up with the two numbers that meet the relationship. This is really important for ensuring the same fraction, decimal and percentage is not chosen too often, as a half does tend to occur more often as it is the easiest of the three relationships. As a mathematical side note, if your students are struggling with the concept of equivalent fractions, decimals and percentages in this game, make sure they know their times tables, as this is really just an extension of doubling, tripling and timesing by 4. You can also help your students out if they're struggling by giving them the relationship and the first number, so thirds, and the first number is 30. And they just have to come up with the second number, which could be either 10 or 90. What is brilliant about this card swap game is that it can be used to teach almost any concept in mathematics, and in fact, almost any topic, period. All that needs to change are the cards students have. You will see on Learn From Play website that we have provided not only the fraction, decimal and percentage cards for half, a third and a quarter, but a simple way to teach the names and properties of 2D shapes. Using these cards, students are given either the number of sides or an image of a shape. You would merely call the name of the shape, such as a square, a rectangle or a rhombus, and students with that picture, or the number 4 on their card, would swap to the other side of the circle. If a triangle were called, anyone holding a 3 or the shape of a triangle would swap using whatever fundamental movement skill was called. As there are so many instances of shapes with 4 sides, I'd advise that you swap the cards regularly, or as students advance, use the numbers to represent right angles rather than just sides. But I don't want to make this all about older students, so we have also included a kindergarten example, where a simple number and dots can be used. When the person in the middle calls out a number or holds up a given number of fingers, students with the matching number of dots or numerals on their card cross the circle and swap places with a student with a matching card.
All right. I hope that was understandable for everybody. I'm going to show you another example of a different game that you can use. So hopefully it's going to click through. It doesn't want to actually click. So this time we're going to have a look at darts, which is another game you can play, and again has a lot of uses with your students.
Just before you play, Rachel, that was awesome.
In
Don't
this
forget,
session, we are...
pause it for a second. Sorry to interrupt.
You're right.
Don't forget, everybody, pop questions in the Q&A box if you think of any questions along the way, because you might forget at the end what you're going to ask. Put them in the Q&A box, and at the end, Rachel will be able to answer them for you. Thanks.
Awesome. All right, so this one's darts we're going to look at.
Looking at teaching students the fundamental skills of the overarm throw combined with addition or subtraction. The lesson plans for this darts activity, the recording sheets and the target mats are all available to download from the Maths and Movement page on the Learn from Play website. All you need to provide are some safety darts like these Boomco darts. These are not like Nerf darts which you shoot out of a gun, as they have a sticky end on them that sticks when thrown. You can get them for about $10 for a pack of 16 darts, either online or in chain stores like Target, Kmart, Big W. When you are using these darts, the targets need to be printed onto photographic paper, as they do not stick to plain or laminated paper, but they stick perfectly to photographic paper. You also need to know that when you print them on photographic paper, they need to be printed with a bubble jet printer like you would have at home, rather than the large photocopier at school, as the heat of a laser printer does something to the paper that makes it so the darts won't stick anymore. And I also found that if your darts stop sticking so well after a couple of weeks, don't throw them out. It's probably just dust or dirt that students have put on the darts. All you need to do is give them a wash in some warm soapy water, leave them to drip dry, and they're good as new. Once you have your darts sorted and have your sheets printed onto photographic paper, you're ready to let your students take it in turns to use overarm javelin style throw to see how accurately they can throw their darts. Each student stands behind a marked line and throws 5 darts at the target. The target can either be stuck to a wall or placed on the floor. You'll see in this video with teachers that if you can't stick the target to a wall, you could get one person to hold the target sheet for another person to throw darts at. Teachers always love this, as they have never been to a professional development session where they get to throw darts at each other. But I had to ensure the person holding the target had safety glasses on to protect their eyes from the darts. After throwing their 5 darts, each student approaches the board, finds their total for their darts by adding together, and records this on the provided recording sheet. The next student is then given the darts and has their turn. Each student can shoot 5 rounds of darts, and the student with the highest score after 5 rounds wins. If you wish your students to practice subtraction, the numbers hit can be added together, and this total is then subtracted from a large number such as 300, and now the first student to 0 can be the winner. Both addition and subtraction recording sheets are available from the Learn from Play website, so you can use both with your students. Good news though, if you don't like the targets we have on the site, the numbers can be adjusted to cater for students from kindergarten to year 6. You just replace those provided with simple single-digit numbers for kindergarten students and complex 3- and 4-digit numbers for older or more capable students. Like the previous card swap game, darts does not need to be limited to addition and subtraction. Students can test their total for odd and even numbers, or practice their short and long division. You can use shapes where students add the sides, faces, or corners, or simple dots for young children. You can use fractions and decimals on the target mat, or you can have students graph their results to allow you to cover data and graphing outcomes and see how much your students are improving in their throwing accuracy. Also, just like the swap cards, this activity can be easily adapted to use with literacy, as the numbers can be swapped for letters. Students could practice making basic CVC words using the letters they hit, or separating consonants from vowels. We've also made a NAIDOC Week fishing version of this, where we used First Nations Australians inspired totem animals to create an alternate game board. You can grab this from the Learn from Play site too, and see how your students go with this activity, although this is definitely best placed on the floor rather than a wall, as the idea is that students are throwing a pretend spear to fish for various water creatures.
All right. So we've got one more pre-recorded one with all the overlay. Was there anything, Jacky, that you wanted to ask anyone before I start that one?
Well, we could have asked this at the end, but I'm happy to throw this in now. Someone's asking suggestions, if you've got any along the way, for students with physical disabilities, how you could maybe adjust the games for them. Any thoughts?
There are definitely, within the games, there are some adjustments. It becomes very difficult, I must admit. in the Skittles one, I make suggestions, which is the next one we're about to watch, where you can move the Skittles closer or further away. But I have to say, to be honest, I really haven't made that many adjustments for physically less capable.
It's difficult,
students.
and also there are so many different. There's a range of disabilities out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess the teacher can have a good think about maybe ways that they could adjust it, make allowances. Yeah, I guess in the card swap game, make them a closer distance to the centre, or there could be things you could try.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But I must say, I have definitely aimed this at able-bodied, full capable students, and I didn't really take that into account, except of course, I mean, it depends where the disability is. If it was, say, the dance activity, you've got no issues with a child who's in a wheelchair because it's an overarm activity. The one that we're doing for the next one you'll see on Skittles is obviously something that they could do from a wheelchair or from sitting on the floor or anything like that. Whereas if it was the running, moving activity, that's less adjustable.
Marlene is making a suggestion about splat balls with washable paint. Sounds like fun. Just a reminder, don't forget the Q&A box. Try and use the Q&A box if you've got any questions for Rachel. Stephen, did you want to chime in there?
Yeah, just on students with disabilities, we teach in a number of special schools with multiple disabilities, whether they be physical or not, and there certainly are ways around and using arms and things like that, and the fundamental movement skills that they are able to do. In order for them to achieve something from that activity. So there's definitely ways and means around that for sure. Just maybe not with all, depending on the disability, as Rachel was saying, maybe just not with all of the fundamental movement skills.
Yep, absolutely. Well, we'll look at this next one, and I definitely do suggest adjustments in here. Still suggesting able-bodied students, but obviously students have a range of abilities, regardless of whether they're able-bodied or not. So there are suggestions in this one for how you can adjust it. Let's have a look. So
in this session,
we are looking at
Skittles.
So let's have a look at this one.
Just like darts, this is easy to implement and adapt and is based on another popular and well-known game, which is 10-pin bowling. Designed to teach students the skill of underarm throwing or bowling, along with sharing, cooperation and teamwork, the first examples we will look at will focus on the all-important maths concept of addition and subtraction. As with the darts activity, the ground mats and scoring sheets are available on the Learn from Play website, but this activity also requires a little bit of equipment that you may not have in your classroom, and that's some Skittles. You can buy a plastic set of these for as little as $5 from Big W, or a wooden set starts at $15 from Kmart. Both of these sets include 6 Skittles and the ball. Don't worry though if you don't have a budget for this, as I have a video that I made a long time ago to show you exactly how you can make a set of colourful Skittles using old water bottles and some paint, and you probably already have a set of tennis balls to go with these. So once you have your Skittles sorted, you need to decide what you are going to stick to the front of them. You could use single-digit numbers, double-digit numbers, or all the same numbers such as 5s, so students can skip count to add up their total. The numbers you choose are dictated by your student's ability and area you wish to teach. When you've decided on the numbers and stuck them to the Skittles, all you need to do is place the Skittles on the Maths and Movement Skittle mat, which you will find on the Learn from Play website. You then need to mark out a line for students to stand behind at least 5 places from the Skittles. This can obviously be adjusted to be further away to make it harder for students and closer to make it easier to suit your students' needs. You can also have groups start close to the Skittles and move the line further away as they improve their underarm bowling skills. Just to point out here, I'm obviously pretty good at bowling, but I'm always a little nervous, especially when I demonstrate to students. So I demonstrate with the ball in my right hand and bend down on my right knee to be facing the Skittles. With my palm facing the Skittles, I explain that the ball should be bowled so that the palm is left facing the Skittles after you bowl, as that's the direction you want the ball to travel. While I demonstrate how to perform the action correctly, I do not release the ball. I walk to the Skittles and, using the ball in my hand, knock over just 2 or 3 Skittles. This is a much more controlled version of the bowling for presentation purposes. I then show students where the knocked over Skittles should be recorded on the sheet, which you can also print off from the Learn from Play website, and add up the total score for the Skittles knocked down, before resetting those Skittles to their starting position. From here, students just need to know that once they have bowled, recorded the Skittles they have knocked down, and found their score, they need to return the Skittles to their start position before passing the ball to the next team member for their turn. Each subsequent round is recorded, and then a total of all 5 rounds are calculated to get a total score. As with all the maths and movement activities, these scores could be used to celebrate the person who gets the highest score, or they could be used to allow students to compete against themselves. This could be by graphing their score over time to see the improvement in their bowling skills, or by moving their starting position further from the pins to see if they can still bowl over the same number of Skittles.
Oh,
So now
sorry.
you have, just like darts, this is their score over time to see the improvement in their bowling skills, or by moving their starting position further from the pins to see if they can still bowl over the same number of Skittles. So now you have the basic idea. I'm going to show you how we can take this further. The easiest change you can make with this activity is to have different numbers on the front of the Skittles so that each group has a different total. It's really interesting when I work with both teachers and students to see whether they add up the score for the Skittles they knocked over or subtract the Skittles that are left standing from the total of all the Skittles. It's also really interesting to see how quickly students realise that if they knock over all 6 Skittles, they will get the same score each time. So having sets of numbers that can be swapped between groups is a simple way to create new addition equations. But the stickers on the front of the Skittles can be virtually anything. Students could add up the total of their Skittles and deduct this from 1,000. They can make the largest or smallest number they can using the digits that they knocked over, or order the Skittles they knocked over from largest to smallest. Students can be given just 5 Skittles numbered 1, 2, 3, 5 and 10, and then multiply together any Skittles they knock over. But it's not just numerals that you can use for maths. You can try Roman numerals, sets of tally marks, or 2D shapes with varying numbers of sides by name or image. For younger children, dots can be used for them to count as a precursor to using numerals. The possibilities are endless.
All right. So what I've got for you now is actually something different. So this one's not pre-recorded. And as I promised at the beginning of our session, I want to show you how you can incorporate maths into traditional Indigenous games. So this I actually came out of work that I did last year with Adelaide University, where I was introduced to something called Yalunga, or Traditional Australian Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Games. And this was created by our Australian Institute of Sport and Sport Australia. And 2 men, Ken Edwards and Troy Meston, managed to create a set of 136 games that are both from the past and those that are played today. So the Yalunga Traditional Indigenous Games resource was developed to provide all Australians with a greater understanding and appreciation of Indigenous culture. It's based on extensive research and includes several hundred accounts of games that were recorded during the 19th century by explorers, government officials, settlers, scientists, and missionaries. One of those games that I'd like to look at is called COLAP, and this is perfect for teaching both distance and probability and chance. So to explain this, I'm going to show you a very short video from Amy Bow and Rob Kessel.
COLAP is all about throwing accuracy and was observed on Mer Island in the Torres Strait, where the COLAP nut was used.
2 players can form a team to compete against another team, or you can play one-on-one. A target or mat is set up and each player gets 4 COLAPs. Players try to get as many COLAPs in or on the target as possible. The team with the most points wins.
If you have heaps of players, you can turn this into a relay race.
You can draw the target in the dirt and use rock or bark as a COLAP, but remember to put everything back where you found it.
All right. So For this, it's actually perfect for teaching distance, as students can measure how far their collap is from the target. But they could also use the collap to predict how likely they are to get their collap into the target. And this could be a simple term, such as they're likely or unlikely if they're very young students, or you could use it as a number. So it could be that they've got a 70% chance of it landing on the target. You could also use it to look at how you can alter the probability of winning a game. So you could have a child who definitely will win because they're so close to the collap that they almost drop it on, as opposed to a child who is so far away that they have 0% chance of winning because they're just not capable of throwing it anywhere near the target. So you can use numbers or words with that. And then you can also look at the idea of fair versus unfair games and how skill improves one's chance of winning and improves the statistics of winning. But there are, as I said, 136 games on there, and collap is just one of them. And for this one, for example, king tongue or kangaroo play, as it's also known, you can use this to measure the distance that children can jump off the ground, or there's a certain distance that they have to be apart from one another. So you can actually measure distances in context using this game, or something like this one. I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but Upwurti, which means stone in the language of the Eastern Areti people of Central Australia. Students need to record and keep track of their score, which is obviously easy for younger children to be learning maths. But for some of the older children, you can play the game and they can measure the distance, measure the angle that they need to be able to roll the ball. Or they can also use hefting. So if you gave them different weighted items to roll, then they can heft them to determine how hard they need to throw it so that it will get through the target. So there are so many games within this resource, and I've shown you 3. Really, it's a case of just looking at them, exploring the games and seeing what's going to work best for you and your students. And that brings me to the end of my part of this professional development. So I hope you've enjoyed this and that I've shown you why students need to be more active, how using time in your maths lessons to teach and practice the fundamental movement skills is going to be beneficial for you and your students. And please make sure, visit the Learn from Play website to check out the games I've mentioned and see all the other activities we've created to cover every area of the maths curriculum from kindergarten to year 6. So as you've heard, if you've got any questions, pop them in the chat. I'll get to answer them at the end of tonight's session. If you have a burning question that doesn't get answered or you think of it afterwards, please just drop me an email. So you can see my email address there. So feel free to send me any questions.
Wow, I can't believe how many skills, both maths and physical, you covered in just a few games. And I've got to be honest, my favorite area of mathematics is probability and chance. And I loved how you threw that in as well. I wouldn't have thought of that with that activity. Amazing. Now, we did have somebody asking, how can I download or how can I get those resources? So we'll talk about maybe that at the end, but it's your site is learnfromplay.com.
Yep.
Yeah, learn from play.
They just need to log into there. It's you create a free login, a free account, and then you can just download the activities.
Awesome, thank you so much. So now we don't go anywhere. We're going to continue on, and I'm going to share my screen now, and I've got a question for you. Can you see that screen there? Thumbs up, Rachel. Stephen's nodding.
Yes, I can see your
That's okay.
Yep.
Here's my question. Can digital maths be active? Now, you're probably picturing in your head children running around the playground with an iPad or throwing it like a frisbee. I don't mean that. No, you wouldn't want to do that with your precious tablets and so on. Can digital maths be active? Well, I'm going to tell you that yes, it can be, but here's a but. Not if it looks like this. So the first thing I want you to do when you go back to school, if you're using an online resource for mathematics, just check out what the students are doing, because often as a teacher, we look at the teacher interface. We're not always looking at the student interface. So just have a look at what the students are doing on their screen, because a lot of what I'm going to suggest now is not always possible if you're using a resource that kind of looks like a worksheet on a screen. And don't laugh, because a lot of resources, even today in 2022, still look a little bit just like question answer. So some of you I know are already using Matific at your school. That's great. Say hello in the chat box if you are. But if you don't know anything about it, I'm going to quickly show you a little bit about it. Then I'm going to show you, yes, how you can make digital maths active. Now, if you don't already know what Matific is, it's an online mathematics resource specifically designed for primary schools, pretty much 4 to 12-year-olds. Although we do have some preschools using it. We also have some high schools using it in the early grades as well. There are thousands of these activities, and if you can see those little examples flashing up, definitely a lot more than a worksheet on the screen. But we do also have worksheets, word problems, etc. It's used all over the world, over about 120 countries it's being used in, available to be used in 40 languages, over 40 languages actually. And hello to everybody over in New Zealand, kia ora. Yes, you can get Matific in Te Reo Māori, which is really lovely. Actually, there's lots of languages. You've got Mandarin and Arabic and Spanish, and yeah, anyway, there's over 40 of them. So special for students if they can see that resource in their own language. It's aligned to your local curriculum wherever you are. There's live reporting for you, so you've the teacher interface, the student interface, and most importantly, the students don't get a red cross when they make an error. So it doesn't feel like a test to them. It's fun, it's engaging. If they make an error, they get to persevere, try again, and there's scaffolding and guidance built in if they do make an error. All right, I'm going to give you 3 examples, just 3, I promise. These are little videos I've made of 3 of our activities. We've got thousands of these. Obviously, normally the student would be on their iPad or their PC. It works on any device, the laptop, Chromebook, whatever they've got. But I've just made you a little video to show. This is good for the younger ones because this is ordinal numbers activity. We've all had our school photo shots taken, haven't we? The class photo where we have to line up and height order usually. This is about ordinal numbers, and the question gets read aloud, by the way. You just click that, it reads the question aloud, hand the scarf to the 3rd student in line. You can imagine how a good way to start with young ones might be to have this on your big screen in your classroom. If you've got a large TV or an electronic whiteboard, put it up there, do it as a shared lesson and talk about the language. Like 8, if you look at 8, it comes from the number 8. But that's very different to the word first or second. How do you relate that to 1 and 2 and so on? Hand the glasses to the 2nd student in the line. So you can imagine doing it as a shared lesson. The students could then do it on their own device. So I think this is how it works best. Students do the digital first, and then I'm sure you're probably going to have better ideas than I've come up with because you're all teachers out there, most of you. I thought of some actual physical games that you could match up quite nicely with that activity. All right, how about you tell the students to find 5 specific objects? So it might be you're going to need these 5 things: a pencil, a ruler, a shoe. You can think of 5 things. They're all different sizes. And you set a time limit. You've got 60 seconds to find all of those objects. Ready, set, go. And it becomes a physical thing they've got to do. Now, if you're worried about crazy movement in the classroom, it could be done outside. You could pick objects that could be done outside. Now, with your 5 objects, you need to order them 1st to 5th, shortest to longest. So this one is not just about ordinal numbers, it becomes about length. And it doesn't have to be shortest to longest. You were talking about hefting before. It could be about the weight of the objects. It could be largest to smallest, the widest, whatever you like. You've got the idea. You could do in the playground a different activity. You've got 5 minutes to find the biggest leaf you can find or the longest leaf you can find. Ready, set, go. This is a great one for autumn or North America, it's fall. Great time of year to do that kind of activity, but whatever the object might be, they've got 5 minutes to go around. So you're making maths physical, and then obviously you gather back together and the whole class, you've got to all line them up and try and get them from shortest to longest if you want to make it about length. Another idea I had was you could set up relay teams and they have a race to see which team can assign the objects to people in the correct order, the fastest. So you might have 2 teams, a team leader on each, and then you've got, like in the video there, a scarf, a hat or whatever, and ready, set, go and see, okay, the hat's got to go to the 3rd person and the scarf's got to go on the 5th person. Can be done indoors or outdoors. As I said, you've probably got even better ideas than I've got. If you think of some, pop them in the chat box. All right, let us know. And don't forget, on Matific too, there's a teacher guidance sheet. So there's some really great ideas on those lesson plans for teachers. All right, here's the second one. What I say to people all the time is, don't be fooled by the cute graphics. Do these activities yourself. They're not so easy. They're not as easy as they look. This one is actually about proportional reasoning. Once again, it will read the question aloud if you need that. So we've got to measure, well, this ladybug is crossing the short log and it timed it. It took 8 seconds. So out comes the ruler. Often there are real world objects in these Matific activities, rulers, protractors, and so on. So I can see it travels 2 centimeters and it took 8 seconds. The question is, how long will it take it to go the whole 4 centimeters? This is teaching about that inverse relationship between division and multiplication. There are multiple solutions. So it works nicely in pairs as well, because the way I solved it might not be the way you solved it. I knew 4 is double 2, so I doubled 8 and got 16. How could you make this after you've played this a few times, and every time they play it, they get new questions, so they won't be bored with it. Once they've got the hang of it, using it digitally, let's go outside. You can go in the playground or in the backyard if you're teaching remotely. Find a distance that they have to run and estimate first. So it might be the length of the basketball court or the cricket pitch or the fence or whatever you've got in the playground. I love estimation. Estimate first. They must write that down. How long is it going to take you to run it and actually do it? You're going to time it. Then ask them a few mathematical questions around that. How long would it take to run it twice? I wonder if anybody would be smart and say, not just double, it would be more than double because you'll be tired on the second lap. How long would it take to walk the same distance if walking is a quarter of the speed of running? Try it. Try doing the walking and see if you're correct. If your friend takes twice as long as you, how long will it take him to run double the distance? So that you can think of really clever questions to go along with it. Visible thinking tip, if you watch a student attempt this question on a device, even just one question, where did they struggle? It's really, you learn so much by watching them do a rich task like this. Maybe they just didn't know how to use a ruler. It could be as simple as that. All right, lucky last one. This is quite in-depth. Okay, so they're going to camp. They've all got different weighted backpacks and a boat, and they've all got to get across the river. And the idea is to do it in the fewest number of steps possible. Now, you can never have more than 150 kilograms in that boat, and someone's got to sail the boat. So obviously talk about it on your screen first. Let students do it themselves or in pairs or in small groups. You can see I'm fiddling around. It's a lot of trial and error in this. It's great. It's very much inquiry-based learning, and eventually I'm going to have someone sail the boat. Eventually I'm going to get those 3 campers to the other side of the river. So lots of fun in that, and it's measuring how many steps it took me, and hopefully next time I might even find a faster way to do it. Now, how could I make this a physical fun activity outside once they're familiar with the concept? Well, let's find a river, a pretend one. Once again, you might use the basketball court, netball court, one side of the river to the other side. Put your students in teams or in groups and make it a race. So you could have those weights on like cards, put them around their neck. So that's the weight around the back. That's the weight of their backpack. And say, and then you're just basically recreating these sorts of questions on how they get across the river. You could even have a hula hoop, and that's your boat, and the kids go in the hula hoop across and back and so on to see if they can solve that and how many steps it takes them. And obviously you can increase the complexity of the problem each time and see how they improve. Bit of a visible thinking tip here too. When you're observing the groups trying to solve these problems physically outside, who are the leaders? And is the leader smart and clever in their thinking, or are they just bossy? And how does it affect the groups if you rearrange the groupings? Does that change anything? All right, I hope I'm giving you some ideas there on how you can, because a lot of people think digital is a standalone. They use digital as a bit of a babysitter for half an hour to give the teachers a rest. Go on your iPads, do some maths, and that's fine. But what I'm suggesting is with something like Matific, you can do a whole lot more and make some of that, fill in some of that 150 minutes that you're supposed to be doing each week with physical activity. Now, if you've never tried Matific, here's a great opportunity. Get your phones ready and scan that QR code. We normally offer a free 30-day trial, but we're actually going to give you the opportunity to have 6 weeks free, and you can start whenever you want. So you'll just get this 6-week voucher. When your school is ready, let us know, and you can start your 6-week trial. So if you can start it straight away if you want, or you can wait till next term, or whatever suits you. So scan the QR code, and then we will send you that 6-week voucher. I'm sorry that if you've already done a free trial this year, I'm sure you can understand, we can't give you again. If you haven't trialed it this year, we're happy to do that for you. So just scan that code and we'll send that voucher off to you, and you're ready to, and it does expire the end of this year, but anytime between now and the end of the year, you can use that 6-week voucher, and it can be the whole school. The more the merrier. All right, thank you for listening to that presentation. Stephen is going to almost do the opposite of what I've just done. I've been talking about digital and turning maths into something active, where he's already got an active program, but he's going to throw in some maths there, I believe. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and hand it over to Stephen. Welcome.
Thank you, Jackie, and thank you, Rachel, for your presentation. And I really feel like we're all type of singing from a similar page, or dancing from a similar page from my perspective, when we're talking about whether it be integration through fundamental movement skills, or in my case, integration through dance, which is our specialty. So I'll start off by giving you a little bit of a brief background about me and about Footsteps. So I live in Adelaide, in Australia. 30 years ago, we started Footsteps, but prior to that, my background was as a competitive ballroom dancer. So I represented Australia for 5 years, and it was type of my whole world, and I lived in a bit of a bubble as almost in that type of elite athlete type of bubble where nothing much existed outside of it, but I absolutely loved what I did. And when that career ended, we, I suppose, took the same path that most people did, and we opened a dance studio. And I learned pretty quickly that that wasn't floating my boat and wasn't going to for very long. So we actually moved into the education space, and we stumbled across an area that that teachers felt uncomfortable with, which was dance. And from there, over 30 years, we've developed programs that we've been teaching in schools across Australia, New Zealand, and North America. This year we'll teach in just over 4,000 schools, both face-to-face and online. COVID for us has allowed us to really hone our online skills and our online platforms for teachers. And what initially was a really fun thing to do for kids, and it still is a fun thing to do for kids with our programming, has now become a lot more educationally in depth, and we're really supporting teachers with their learning outcomes across other curriculum areas. And I suppose that's what we're talking about today, specifically with maths. So I've got one slide here that I'm going to work through and give you some examples of how our programs specifically deal with those, with communication with the students while that's going on. So dance, we can talk about things like counting and patterns. So obviously with music and the structure of music, we're constantly talking to the kids about that structure with beats, bars and bridges in the music. That allows us to then talk about subtraction, addition, multiplication. And so we can type of integrate that in to our actual dance lesson, where we're not only covering the dance curriculum through health and PE and also the arts, but we're also getting that integrated component. And what we're trying to do with teachers is, which is their background, that's where their specialty lies, are those other curriculum areas, trying to get them to use dance either in their classrooms or our classrooms to be able to take that integrated process back into their classroom. Some examples, measurement as an example. I know both Rachel and Jacky have spoken about that with their specific examples that they had up on the screen. We had a dance in our curriculum last year called Walk the Dinosaur. It was a junior primary dance, specifically targeted to those 4/5-year-olds through to about 7. And we were able to talk about different sized dinosaurs taking different size length steps, and also the varying heights of those dinosaurs as well. So that allows you as a teacher to then take that from our dance lesson or our online lesson and then work that back into with your children through your maths lessons. As an example, you'll find it works really well with your kinesthetic learners. I now know that I was definitely one of those as a primary school student, and even as an adult now, trying to sit still for too long just doesn't work for me. So using dance as an example or movement as an example to teach across those other curriculum areas is really, it really reinforces to those kinesthetic learners, as well as the normal learners as well, and type of engages them in a different way. Geometry and symmetry, so things to do with making shapes with not only your choreography, but also your arms, for example, allows us to talk about shapes. It allows us to talk about angles, and all other types of mathematical curriculum that we can then use as an integrated process with dance. Choreography, in the Australian curriculum at the moment, there are two main focuses with dance. One is indigenous dance, and the other is choreographic dance, where students actually get to use and make up their own dances to a set of criteria or loose criteria that we give them at the start of the lesson. It's very, very easy to then build in those integrated approaches to the criteria that you set down for them as you move into that choreographic lesson. Increasing and decreasing the speed of music is also a great area where you can integrate maths into it. So, for example, one of our upper primary and secondary dances that we teach is the foxtrot, a really traditional dance, but it uses two types of movement that are both slow and quick. So the students then have to learn about how many beats make up a slow movement versus how many beats make up a quick movement. So that then talks about the slower the music, the longer the step has to be. Once again, measurement comes into it. The quicker the step, the quicker the music, the shorter the step has to be. So you can then integrate that as well. We've got a bit of a discount on our QR code down the bottom there, if you can see that. We've got these two online discos. They're both age-based, so they're pitched at like a junior primary level and then a middle and upper primary level. You can stop them, you can start them whenever you like. Really easy then for you prior to using it with your students are looking at the things that I've spoken about today: arm movements, angles, lengths of steps, to be able to then work out through those online discos how you're going to integrate maths through that movement. We find that dance is quite an empowering subjectivity for kids, because there aren't too many kids in your classes that do dance outside of school. So everyone tends to be in the same boat. And therefore they're quite open-eyed to trying, knowing that no one is any really better than them when they're starting to learn dance, versus, I suppose, other sports where you might have kids that are really good footy players and you've got kids that maybe aren't so good or proficient at that feel a bit funny with that. So dance is one of those really good areas that most students are in a similar boat to each other. I haven't got too much more to say, Jackie. If anyone has any questions, I'm more than happy to give my feedback and experience on them. But yeah, thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed it, and it's been fascinating listening to Rachel and her presentation. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Stephen. If you just stop sharing, and I'll put your QR code and my QR code up on the screen. I can't believe how fast the time's gone. And Stephen, that was pretty amazing. How I love it when you can kill two birds with one stone. As Rachel pointed out before, the curriculum's big. There's a lot we have to cover. So if you can be ticking off a few outcomes from different parts of the curriculum all at the same time, How awesome is that? And Stephen, you came up with some really great ideas there. I'm just going to quickly, while if you want to scan, there's the Matific one, the offer on the left, footsteps on the right. We've got our sites there you can go to. The websites are up there. Somebody wrote, Shannon said that they've been using bucket drumming and music notation to learn the 4 times tables. Pretty clever stuff. Love it. All right, just checking that Q&A box before we finish, if there's any other questions there. Someone's asking about pricing around Matific. I won't get into that now because it depends on the size of the school and how long your subscription is for. So you can always contact me, Jacky with a Y, Jacky, Jacky@matific.com, and we can get onto that. We're going to be emailing you a lot of this information anyway. Somebody wanted some copy of slides or minutes from the presentations. You're going to get the recording. The recording will be sent to you. I'm sure Stephen and Rachel, you're probably planning on maybe contacting the people who attended, and we'll do a follow-up with you. So if you've got any other questions, now's your chance, because we've actually gone a little bit over time. This is probably my fault for talking too much. There's going to be a very, very quick survey when you log off. Please, please, please do that, because it really does help us with our future planning with our webinars. I'm just going back to the chat box. I can see lots of people saying lovely things. So thank you so much for all those lovely comments. And yes, if you could do that little quick survey at the end, that would be great. Just one more check of the Q&A box. Looking good. So once again, I really wanted to thank all of you for joining us and spending that hour with us. I really hope it was worthwhile time and you got some good ideas. I'm sure you did, especially Rachel. Thank you, Rachel. That was an awesome presentation. Almost makes me want to go back to being in the classroom. Not quite though, but almost. You did a great job. And Stephen, really innovative ideas when it comes to movement and dance and maths. Thank you. So I'm Jacky from Matific. I really hope you enjoyed this presentation today, and we'll see you again next time. Bye for now.